Ellie never imagined that her life would change so abruptly on the very day she tripped over the frayed edge of a hallway rug and found a strange note hidden underneath. It was her third week working as a cleaner in the lavish mansion of 75-year-old Mr. Walter Shaw, a quiet student with never-ending tuition debt and a tiny rented room. Ellie had nearly given up hope of ever getting her life on track. But this job, with its promise of stable pay, had felt like a miracle she couldn't afford to question. From their very first meeting, Mr. Shaw came across as a reserved but polite man. His silver hair was always perfectly combed back. He wore tailored suits, and his cologne was more telling of his status than the marble floors beneath her feet. He rarely smiled, never engaged in small talk, and gave curt instructions about which rooms to clean, and more importantly, which ones she was not to snoop around in. Ellie respected that. She, too, hated it when people invaded her space. And yet, there was something about this house that had unsettled her from day one. Walter paid well, generously even, though his face never revealed the slightest emotion when handing over the envelope. Just compensation for your labor, he once told her flatly. But Ellie sensed something strange about this place. The entire mansion felt like it had been cut in half and stitched together again, unevenly. The front foyer was sleek and modern, while deeper down the hall, behind the heavy oak doors, another era seemed to reign. Winding staircases, aged parquet floors worn down by decades of footsteps, and dust lurking in corners whispered that some rooms here hadn't been touched by sunlight or people in years. That morning, Walter had asked her to clean a wing she hadn't entered before. The hallway was lined with old family portraits, mostly of Walter himself as a young man, and a woman whose face was either blurred or deliberately scratched out in every photo. Ellie's stomach twisted. Why would someone do that to family photos? She had no answers, only questions she didn't dare ask. The rug in that corridor was old, its colors faded, unlike the rest of the luxury surrounding it. As Ellie passed by, her sneaker caught on the corner, and the fabric flipped just enough to reveal something sticking out. She crouched down and found a crumpled piece of yellowed paper, clearly aged. Scrawled in a shaky child's handwriting were the words, "Daddy, find me?" Ellie's fingers trembled. The simplicity of the message was crushing. It wasn't just a note. It was a cry, maybe a desperate call for help. She quickly looked over her shoulder. The corridor was empty. No sign of Walter. Her heart pounded as she slipped the note into her pocket. A part of her wanted to show it to him immediately. Another part warned her that getting involved could cost her the job she so desperately needed. She couldn't afford to be reckless. Not now. But pretending like she hadn't seen it felt impossible. Something deep inside her whispered that this was bigger than she realized. Maybe a tragedy. Maybe even a buried crime. Down the hall stood a large wooden door she'd never cleaned behind before. Curiosity pulled at her, but she resisted. Not yet. She finished her duties, returned home to her cramped dorm room, and sat in silence for what felt like hours. The note was still in her pocket. "Daddy, find me?" The words echoed in her mind like a whisper in the dark. Had Mr. Shaw ever had children? If so, where were they now? Or, and this possibility chilled her, had someone else written that note to him and been forgotten? She remembered the scratched-out faces in the photographs, the way some rooms seemed untouched for decades. She clutched the fragile piece of paper in her hand, like it was the only real thing in the world. And at that moment, Ellie realized one terrifying truth. There was no going back. That note was just the beginning of something much darker. Ellie tried to keep up her usual rhythm at work, but her thoughts kept circling back to the note she found hidden beneath the rug. "Daddy, find me?" The words wouldn't leave her alone. That morning, Mr. Shaw had unexpectedly left the house for some important business, giving her full run of the mansion, though not without a parting remark. Cleaned thoroughly, but no improvisation. There was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. A warning, not a suggestion. She returned to the hallway where she had found the note, half expecting someone to come, and removed it already. The rug was undisturbed now. She cautiously lifted the edge again, but there was nothing beneath it, just a faded imprint on the dusty floor. The note was still safe in her pocket, but the emptiness where it had once been hidden gave her an eerie sense of loneliness. This house didn't just keep secrets. It swallowed them. Moving into the living room, Ellie began wiping dust off the shelves, which were cluttered with antique frames and family relics. One photograph caught her eye. A young Walter Shaw, smiling stiffly beside a woman and a little girl. The child was grinning toward the camera, but someone had carefully cut away the right side of her face. Just cleanly snipped it out, like she was never meant to be remembered whole. Ellie's chest tightened. She ran her fingers gently along the jagged edge of the photo, then noticed a pile of old papers tucked behind some books. Among them were crude drawings made in colored pencil, a sun, a crooked house, a tree. In the corner of one page, written in uneven block letters, Alina, 5 years old. Her breath caught. Alina, the name from the drawings. Could she be the one who wrote the note? On a dusty chair in the corner lay a small, faded t-shirt with a cartoon dog printed on the front. Clearly a child's, no older than size 8. Ellie picked it up. The scent of age and neglect clung to the fabric. Why was this still here? Why would Walter Shaw keep children's clothes in a house when no child had lived in years? She could almost picture a little girl running barefoot to the vast living room, clutching crayons and paper, laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Now, silence sat like a heavy fog. Later, Ellie headed toward 2 small rooms at the end of the far hallway, both part of her cleaning assignment that day. The door to the first room was cracked open, and the darkness inside seemed unnatural, as if even light avoided the space. She flipped on the wall sconce and stepped in. The room was nearly bare. Stripped wallpaper peeled from the corners. The floor creaked with each step, and a tall, antique wardrobe stood against the wall, its handle broken. The door sealed shut with screws or nails. Ellie stepped closer, running her fingers along the cool metal of the fastenings. Why lock a wardrobe like this? What was inside that had to be sealed away? In her mind, she heard the note again. Daddy, find me? She saw the girl's half-missing face in the photo and felt a jolt in her gut, as if some part of her already knew that this house had witnessed something terrible. She gently tapped the doors of the wardrobe. The dull thud echoed in the still room. Inside, it felt like cold air waited. A hush, a warning. Resisting the urge to pry it open, Ellie wiped down the furniture and kept her hands to herself. But just before leaving, she noticed something odd. Faint patches of adhesive and dark smudges on the walls, like something had once been mounted there and hastily removed. Maybe pictures, maybe something else. She walked back toward the main hall, trying to keep her face calm, but inside, her thoughts spun like a storm. The sealed wardrobe, the mutilated photos, the forgotten t-shirt, the name Alina, the note. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a story, and not one with a happy ending. And somehow, Ellie was now part of it, even if all she wanted was a paycheck. That day, the mansion felt especially heavy, like the rain tapping on its high windows had seeped into the walls. A dim gloom filled the front hall. Ellie had just finished cleaning the last guest room when she noticed something unusual. A door to a small storage closet, one that was usually locked tight, stood ajar. Mr. Shaw never left it open. He treated that room like it held something dangerous or fragile, or both. But today he must have forgotten. Curiosity tugged at her stronger than fear. Ever since finding that note and the other strange clues, she'd started to believe that this house was more than just a home for a lonely old man. She stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and forgotten memories. A writing desk sat against the far wall, its surface covered in a thick film. The drawers were cracked and faded. One had a broken handle. Everything in the room whispered, "Don't touch," but she couldn't stop herself. With a gentle pull, she opened the top drawer. It resisted, groaned on rusted runners, then finally gave in, and a flood of yellowed paper spilled out onto the floor. Torn notebook pages, scribbles, letters smudged into nonsense. Ellie crouched and began to sort them on the desk. It was chaos, like someone had stuffed them away in a panic. Then one page caught her eye, unmistakably written in a child's hand. The edges were jagged, ripped from a spiral-bound notebook. Across the top, shaky lines read, "Daddy said we'd go to park today, but Mommy said he had work." I was sad, but I didn't say anything, because I don't like when she gets mad. It's scary. Only Daddy can make me feel better. I really wanted to feed the ducks. He said next time. What if there's no next time? At the bottom, the signature. Alina, 7 years old. Ellie's breath caught in her throat. There was again, Alina, the same name from the drawings. The same one from the note. More fragments followed. One read, Mom says not to talk about the bad things. I hide in the closet when she yells. It's safer there. Another was mostly illegible, the words blurred by time and moisture. But Ellie made out the beginning. Mom said if Daddy. The sentence ended in a torn edge. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't just a case of a missing child. Alina was scared. She had written about hiding, about silence, and somehow no one had heard her. Ellie imagined a girl curled up inside a wardrobe, scribbling these thoughts in a notebook with crayon fingers, hoping someone would find them. The horror of it swelled in her chest. She carefully placed the diary fragments in a plastic folder and slid it into her bag. It was too important to leave behind. Later, sitting on her narrow dorm bed, Ellie read through the notes again under the soft glow of her desk lamp. The same images came back to her. The t-shirt, the photographs with scratched out faces, the sealed furniture, the abandoned drawings. Alina had been here. She had lived, hoped, suffered, and vanished. And somewhere in this mansion's long corridors, its cold silence and locked rooms, pieces of her were still waiting to be found. Ellie no longer believed she could just clean and walk away. The house had spoken. Now she had to listen. For weeks, Ellie had noticed the same old woman sitting across the street from a mansion. Every afternoon, like clockwork, the lady would settle on the bench beneath the chestnut tree, knitting quietly, her scarf wrapped tight, her eyes always alert. At first, Ellie thought it was just curiosity, a neighbor keeping tabs on the house. But after everything she'd uncovered, that steady gaze began to feel like something more. So one evening, after finishing her shift, Ellie decided to approach her. The woman looked up as she came near, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she'd been expecting her. "Good evening," Ellie said gently, offering a polite smile. "You probably see me around. I work at the Shaw residence." The old woman gave a slow nod. "I've seen you, yes. You're the new house girl." "That's right. I'm Ellie." She paused, then added carefully, "You've lived here a long time, haven't you?" "Since I was young enough to remember when the street was all gravel and roses," the woman said with a thin smile. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held something deeper, something cautious. "Why do you ask?" Ellie's heart started to thump. She didn't want to intrude or push too hard, but the ache in her chest wouldn't let her stay silent. "I found some things in the house. Old children's drawings. Notes. There was a girl. I think her name was Alina. I wondered if you remembered her." The woman's face changed. Not startled. More like someone had expected this moment for a long time. She set her knitting in her lap and exhaled deeply. "Alina," she murmured, almost to herself. "That sweet little thing. Blonde curls, eyes like the sky after a storm." She used to run down the sidewalk with her crayons in her hand, always humming. Ellie felt her chest tighten. The description matched what she had imagined from the drawings. "What happened to her?" she asked quietly. The old woman's brows drew together. "One day, she was just gone. Must have been 7, maybe 8. But she didn't leave with her father. She left with her mother. That woman was difficult, jealous, moody. I remember shouting, 'Slam doors.' The poor girl caught in the middle." "And Mr. Shaw?" Ellie asked. Try to keep her voice from trembling. "Did he look for her?" The woman nodded slowly. "He was never the same after they left. Shut down completely. People say he tried to find them, but I don't think he had much luck. She vanished, and after a while, so did the mother." The air between them grew still. "So no one knows where Alina went?" Ellie asked, almost whispering. "No one talks about it," the old woman said. "But I always thought something was off. You don't just disappear like that, not without something being terribly wrong." Ellie wrapped her arms around herself. feeling the cold seep into her bones. How long ago was this? More than 20 years. If that little girl's still alive, she's a woman now. Thank you, Ellie said softly. You've helped more than you know. The woman patted her hand gently. Be careful in that house, dear. He's not a bad man. But a broken heart can bury more than just sorrow. Ellie nodded and turned to leave, her mind reeling. If Alina had truly vanished with her mother, why was every inch of that mansion still echoing with her presence? And why did Mr. Shaw keep all of her things, the photos, the toys, the closet full of ghosts? The question wasn't just what had happened to Alina. It was why no one ever really looked. Ellie barely slept that night. The old woman's words echoed in her head, mingling with the haunting fragments from Alina's diary. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. Something had gone horribly wrong in that house. And Mr. Shaw, whether he admitted it or not, was part of it. By morning, Ellie knew she couldn't go on like this, tiptoeing around what was quickly becoming more than just a mystery. She needed answers, even if it meant risking the only job that was keeping her afloat. When she arrived at the house, there was a new woman in the kitchen, older, dressed in white with a stiff apron and quiet, professional movements. Ellie had never seen her before. Good morning, Ellie said cautiously. The woman glanced up, barely meeting her eyes. Mr. Shaw is in his study. Her tone was clipped, almost wary, as if she already knew why Ellie was here and didn't want to get involved. Ellie made her way down the hall, her heart hammering harder with each step. Normally, Mr. Shaw would summon her when he needed something, but this time she was coming to him, uninvited. She paused outside his office, took a deep breath, and knocked once before pushing the door open. He was sitting behind his massive desk, bathed in the glow of morning light, streaming through the tall windows. Papers were neatly arranged in front of him, but he wasn't reading them. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. Something wrong, Ellie? He asked, his voice quiet but carrying a clear warning. She stepped forward slowly. I need to ask you something. Please don't be angry. But who was Alina? Silence fell like a weight between them. His face changed. Not with surprise, with something far more guarded. He closed the folder in front of him and leaned back in his chair. Why are you asking? I found some things, she said carefully. Drawings, a note, and a diary. I didn't mean to dig, but the house is full of her, and I can't just ignore it anymore. Mr. Shaw stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, walking around the desk, until he was just a few feet from her. You were hired to clean, he said flatly, not to play detective. I know, she said, voice trembling, but I can't pretend like I haven't seen what I've seen. I know she was your daughter. His jaw clenched. He looked away, toward the window, then down at the floor. Yes, he said finally. Her name was Alina. She was my daughter. Ellie felt her breath catch. What happened to her? She whispered. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was low and hoarse. I don't know. You don't know? I looked. God knows I looked. But by the time I realized she was gone for good, it was too late. He stopped, biting back something too painful to say. Ellie waited, heart pounding. Then she asked a question that had haunted her since she found the first note. Why do you still keep all her things? He gave a bitter laugh and rubbed his temples. Because I couldn't let go. Because I was a coward. Because I kept hoping maybe one day she'd come back. He looked up at her then, and for the first time, Ellie saw not the distant, stiff man she worked for, but a father consumed by guilt. She wrote you letters, Ellie said softly. Little notes. She was waiting for you. His face twisted. Pain. Regret. Something close to shame. I know, he said. Or at least, I suspected. But I couldn't face it. Couldn't face what I'd done or failed to do. Did you try to get her back? He nodded slowly. After my wife left with her, I tried to follow, but she disappeared. Changed her name. Took Alina somewhere I couldn't trace. When I finally found out where they'd gone, Alina had already been placed in state care. By then, the paper trail was cold. I hired investigators. I even went through the courts. But no one knew where she ended up. He paused, voice cracking. They told me she might have been adopted, might have moved states, or might be dead. Ellie swallowed hard. And you never stopped looking? Every year on her birthday, he said, staring into nothing. I checked databases, hospitals, adoption records. Nothing. Eventually, I ran out of options. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ellie asked, barely above a whisper, "What if she's still alive?" He looked at her, and for a second, something flickered in his eyes. Hope? Despair? Maybe both. I wouldn't even know how to recognize her, he said quietly. Ellie's hands were shaking, but she pressed on. She remembered you, she said. Even through everything, she remembered. She was scared, but she hoped you'd come. He lowered his head. I didn't deserve her hope, he murmured, but I held on to it anyway. Another silence. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded once, then more softly than she expected, said, So am I. Ellie had never imagined she'd be doing this, chasing down official records, digging through old archives, pretending to be someone's distant relative just to get access to names and dusty files. But after that conversation with Mr. Shaw, something inside her shifted. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It felt like a responsibility. She started with the local vital records office. The building itself looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 80s. Faded posters on the walls, scratched linoleum floors, and fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. Behind the front desk sat a stern-looking woman with cropped gray hair and thick glasses. I'm looking for information on a girl named Alina, Ellie said, trying to sound confident. Last name might have been Shaw, born about 20 years ago. The woman peered over her glasses. You're looking for someone else's birth certificate? Ellie had expected that. She leaned in slightly. She was my cousin. We lost touch after her mother moved away. I'm trying to find out what happened to her. The woman narrowed her eyes, clearly suspicious, but after a moment sighed. I can't give you any official copies without authorization, but I can at least check if we have a record. Ellie nodded, clutching her bag. The clerk disappeared into the back. Ellie waited, heart pounding. After what felt like forever, the woman returned, empty-handed. We don't have any Alina Shaw born here in that time frame. Could be she was registered under a different name. Ellie left, trying to remain calm. Different name could mean so many things. Maybe the mother had changed it. Or maybe the birth had been registered in another city. Or maybe someone wanted her to disappear. Her next stop was the city library, specifically the archive section. She remembered reading that local newspapers sometimes ran blurbs on missing children, even if the police tried to keep details out of the press. If there was anything, even a small mention, it might give her something to work with. An elderly librarian named Mrs. Green helped her find the right stack of microfilm newspapers, sorted by year. Ellie sat down at the old viewing machine and began scrolling. She scanned every issue from 2 decades ago, page after page of event calendars, obituaries, police blotters. Nothing. She was about to give up when something caught her eye. A tiny article, almost lost between classified ads and an announcement for a church bake sale. Young girl missing under mysterious circumstances. It was brief. An unnamed child, believed to be around 7 years old, disappeared earlier this week. Authorities had withheld her name at the request of the parents. Reports suggest the mother was initially uncooperative with police and has since refused further contact. The father, described as distressed and actively searching, declined to comment. Investigators believe the child may have been taken out of state. No names, no photos, but it lined up the age, the timeline, the vague mention of a father. That had to be Mr. Shaw. Ellie kept reading. A week later, another article appeared, even shorter. Mother of missing girl leaves city. Investigation ongoing. That was it. The case just vanished. No follow-up. No resolution. She asked the librarian if there were any additional notes or clippings in the archives. Mrs. Green shook her head. If it didn't make headlines, we probably don't have more than that. As Ellie stepped out into the sunlight, the world felt oddly unreal. People passed by with grocery bags, chatting on their phones, walking dogs. And here she was, holding proof that a child had gone missing, buried in 2 inches of column space like it never even mattered. She sat on a bench outside and reread the articles. The implications were sinking in. The mother had taken the child and disappeared. The police barely followed up. The press let it fade. And Mr. Shaw, her employer, who now spent his life walking through a house filled with silent ghosts, had been left behind. But it wasn't just a story anymore. A horrible thought crept into her mind. What if the girl hadn't been registered under Shaw at all? What if her mother gave her a different last name to hide her? Ellie remembered Mr. Shaw's words. She changed everything, even her name. What if Alina had been raised under a new identity? What if she'd grown up not even knowing who she was? A deeper chill settled in her chest. What if Alina was still alive? What if she was closer than anyone could imagine? The thought wouldn't let Ellie go. What if Alina was still alive? What if someone had raised her under a new name, in another town, another reality? And what if, somehow, some impossible way, that girl was her? It sounded insane, the kind of twist that only belonged in novels or melodramas. But her gut wouldn't let it go. The way she'd reacted to the note under the carpet, the chill she felt in that old pink bedroom, the fragment of emotion that rose in her chest when she read the diary. Something in her bones recognized those things. That place, that fear. She tried to shake it off. It couldn't be. She would have remembered, wouldn't she? Except she didn't remember much of anything from before she was 9. The early years were a blur. A fog of vague sensations, the smell of dust, the color pink, the shape of a wardrobe door. She remembered arriving at the orphanage. She remembered the foster home, the woman who had tried to give her love before passing away from illness. She remembered the cramped apartment she'd moved into after turning 18. But before that, shadows. Now she was standing in the attic again, scrubbing the corners of a forgotten cabinet on the 2nd floor of Mr. Shaw's mansion. He'd asked her to clear out everything at the end of the hallway. As if he knew, as if he was deliberately testing her. She didn't even notice the wooden box at first, tucked behind layers of fabric, wrapped in an old towel. She nearly tossed it out until something about its weight stopped her. She pulled it open. Inside were faded documents, old receipts, and then, tucked carefully between yellowed papers, a birth certificate. Her breath caught. Name: Alina Koloskova. Mother: Irina Koloskova. Father: blank. The same first name. The same mother's name Mr. Shaw had spoken in pain just days before. Ellie stared at the date. It matched hers exactly. Day, month, year. Her throat closed up. She found another paper, a court document, an adoption order from 17 years ago. The child's surname changed. The new last name was blurred by an old ink spill, but she could make out the first few letters. Me, or maybe me. She felt dizzy. Her legal name now didn't match either. Not quite. She was legally Ellery, shortened to Ellie. Her documents said she'd been adopted at age 9 after bouncing through several homes. The paper trail had always been messy, and no one ever gave her answers. Just vague apologies. Your records were lost. There was a fire at the old office. We're sorry, honey, we did the best we could. But here, in her hand, was a thread, a real one, and it was leading somewhere terrifying. Then she saw the last page. A letter written in a shaky hand. Irina is dead. The girl is in care. If she's not claimed soon, they'll send her out of state. Please, do something. No name, no signature. But she recognized the grief in those words. The panic. Ellie sank down on the attic floor, clutching the documents to her chest. What if I'm her? What if I'm Alina? It was unthinkable, and yet everything made sense. The drawings, the notes, the strange way her hands trembled when she touched the walls of the mansion, the ache in her chest when Mr. Shaw spoke about his daughter. She remembered something else now, something small, a woman yelling, a door slamming, the sound of crying, not hers, and the feeling of being locked in a closet for hours. It wasn't a memory she had invented. It was real. She sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the names on the papers. A child vanished, a father broken, a system that let it all happen. And her, the girl who had wandered through her whole life feeling like something was missing, because something was, because she had been missing. The question now was what to do with the truth. Should she tell him? Walk into the kitchen and say, "Mr. Shaw, I'm Alina. I'm your daughter." Would he believe her? Would he cry? Would he deny it? Push her away? Accuse her of inventing it? Or worse, what if he already knew? What if he'd suspected from the moment she showed up at his door, looking for a cleaning job? Ellie didn't know. But one thing was certain. She couldn't pretend anymore. This wasn't just someone else's story. It was hers. And the truth was waiting to be faced. Ellie didn't sleep that night. She kept the documents under her pillow like a child hiding treasure. Or evidence. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fragments. A pink bedroom, the trembling glow of nightlight, a woman's shouting voice, and the darkness inside a wooden wardrobe. In the morning, she moved like a ghost. Made herself tea she didn't drink. Packed her bag. Checked 3 times that the folded birth certificate and court order were still there. She wasn't even sure what she planned to do. Confront him? Cry in front of him? Ask for answers? Or just be seen? Mr. Shaw, or rather her father, had been quiet since their conversation days ago. Since he admitted his guilt, his sorrow. He hadn't mentioned firing her. Hadn't spoken of the secret room or the diary. It was as if they both silently agreed to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had. When she arrived at the mansion, the air inside was colder than usual. The weather outside had turned gray and still. Even the house felt like it was holding its breath. He was in the library when she found him, sitting in his leather chair, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the fireplace though there was no fire. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. No turning back. "Mr. Shaw," she said, then paused. "Valerie." He looked up, startled by the sound of his name on her lips. "I need to talk to you," she continued, "and I need you to listen. Please." He nodded slowly, said nothing. Ellie walked forward, holding the documents in both hands. "I found these," she said. Her voice was steady, even as her heart tried to leap from her chest. A birth certificate, a court order, and a letter. His eyes narrowed. I think you already know what they say," she added softly. A pause, then his voice hoarse. "Where'd you find them?" "In the attic," she replied. "Behind the old curtains, in a wooden box. You tucked them away like you were afraid to face them." He didn't deny it. He stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Ellie took a breath. "My name is Ellery, but I think I used to be Alina." His hands trembled. He stood up, but not toward her, almost away, as if trying to absorb the moment. "I grew up in foster care," she continued, "after being adopted by a woman who died when I was 12. No one ever told me where I came from. I had dreams I couldn't explain, a fear of dark closets. I thought it was just childhood trauma. But then I found the note under the rug, and the diary, and the room." She paused, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "You were looking for me, and I was here the whole time." He turned then, slowly, and there was on his face devastation, confusion, disbelief. "I suspected," he said at last, voice barely audible. "There was something about you. The way you looked at the photographs, the way you stood in that pink room." He choked back a breath. "But I couldn't let myself believe it. What if it wasn't true? What if I scared you away?" Ellie stepped closer, the document still in her hand. "I was scared. I still am. But I think I need to hear it from you. Were you ever going to tell me? If you'd known for sure?" He nodded once. "Yes." Then, after a pause, "I would have fallen to my knees and begged you to forgive me." Silence. "I'm not sure if I can," she said quietly. "Not yet." He lowered his eyes. "I wouldn't ask you to." Ellie took one final step forward. "I read everything she wrote. The way she loved you. The way she waited. Even when she was scared, she hoped you'd come." He winced, turned away for a moment, then whispered, "And I didn't, not in time." Another silence. Not heavy, just honest. I'm not that little girl anymore, she said. I don't remember everything. I don't even know if we can be family again. He looked up, eyes shining. But maybe, Ellie added, we can talk. Start with that. He nodded, something fragile breaking in his posture. They didn't embrace. Not yet, but the space between them had changed. For the first time in 2 decades, father and daughter stood face to face, and neither turned away. The next morning, Ellie sat in the kitchen of the mansion, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, warming the marble floor beneath her bare feet. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It still held memories too many, but they weren't choking her now. They were simply present. She hadn't stayed the night before. After the conversation with Valerie, she'd gone back to her tiny apartment, clutching the documents like a lifeline. She hadn't cried. Not yet. Her body was still protecting her from that flood. But this morning she returned. He greeted her at the door. No staff, no words, just a long, searching look and a slow nod, like saying, yes, you came back. Thank you. Now, the kettle whistled on the stove. She poured tea, placed 2 mugs on the table. He entered quietly, in a soft sweater that made him look less like a powerful businessman and more like an old man carrying too many winters in his chest. They sat. She pushed the second mug toward him. I always wondered if I had a dad, she said. When I was little, I'd make up stories. That he was a spy, or a soldier, or a prince. I was none of those, he said, voice low. I was a coward. Ellie shook her head slowly. No, you were a broken man. There's a difference. He didn't answer, just stared into his tea. I don't remember her, Ellie admitted. Not clearly. Flashes, maybe. A voice, a smell, fear, but not love. Valerie's hand clenched slightly. I failed you, both of you. Maybe I didn't protect you from her. I didn't fight hard enough when it mattered. You were young, she said, too young to understand what trauma does to a child, or to a woman like her. He nodded. I thought I could fix it all with silence, with money, with time, but I only created distance. There was a long pause. Then Ellie asked, why didn't you search harder after she died? I did, he said quickly, but it was too late. The documents were gone. The trail was cold. I hired people, sent letters, traveled, but they said the child had been adopted, that the trail ended. I knew I should have done more. But I was broken, Ellie. I was grieving a living child. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Do you want a relationship now? She asked softly. With me? He looked up. His face didn't hold hope, just a question. I want to know you, he said. If you'll let me. Ellie stared down at the table. The silence between them wasn't hostile, just full of the weight of 2 decades. She remembered the diary. The words. He's mean, but he's kind. I'll wait. Then she looked up. I don't promise anything. I don't know what I can give, but maybe we start small. He nodded. Anything you're willing to give, I'll take. Another long pause. Then she asked almost shyly, can I see more pictures? From when I was little. He blinked. Of course. They rose together and walked toward the study, where the boxes were kept. Inside were albums she hadn't opened yet. One had a photo of a toddler with messy blonde curls, holding a red balloon. Another showed the same little girl in a ballerina dress, face squished into a cake, eyes wide with joy. Ellie held the photo gently. I was happy once, she whispered. You were loved, he replied. They sat side by side, flipping pages. And somewhere in the stillness, a bridge began to form. Not forgiveness, not yet, but connection. And sometimes that's where healing starts.